right, we're ready to get started. Hi, Star Trek. I'm Lindsay Knoll, and I'm a digital accessibility coordinator and systems training lead at The Ohio State University. Our job is basically to ensure that all of our digital products and services are ADA compliant and accessible to people with disabilities. A little about me. Prior to coming to the university, I taught middle school special education for students with moderate to intensive disabilities. And if you're wondering how I got into IT after doing that, that's fair because I am too.
And my name is Dan Keck. I'm a web developer, and I'm the other accessibility coordinator in the advancement office at Ohio State. And we're going to briefly show our agenda for today. We're going to go over disability, tell you about a product called MeetSnoot, do some user interviews, give some advice, and wrap it up. So before we start off, here's a disclaimer. This presentation is not legal advice. If you have questions about meeting accessibility standards required by law in your jurisdiction or by a contract with an entity that you're providing services to, please consult your legal counsel.
Okay, so 1 in 4 Americans actually has a disability. So that might be surprising to hear. You might think if I'm downstairs shopping at the mall, and I walk past 4 people, not one of them has a disability. Well, that's because some disabilities are more obvious, such as a person in a wheelchair or someone without hands that can't operate a mouse. But others are not so apparent, such as someone who is visually impaired and has to increase text size on their device privately on their own time, or someone who is hearing impaired and has learned to read lips, but on their own time they couldn't access audio without video. And it's important to remember that disabilities don't have to be permanent. Some can last someone's whole lifetime. Sometimes they can last a few months or even a few minutes. Some examples are some injuries. So concussions, broken bones, or mild traumatic brain injuries, illnesses such as cancer, or others, migraines, epilepsy, or hemiparesis or hemiplegia, which is temporary paralysis or weakness in the body due to a stroke. So the American Psychological Association offered a definition for disability as a mismatch between a disabled person and their environment. And we really liked this quote because it kind of reminds me of the saying, like, when a flower doesn't bloom, we change the environment in which it grows and not the flower, meaning that the environment is actually where the barriers lie and not in the disability. Yes, and so our little picture, guys. So some ways that design has failed people with disabilities in our physical world, intercom announcements that aren't accessible to deaf people, someone with sensory processing difficulties due to being on the autism spectrum and not having a sensory-friendly place to go at a sporting event or a concert, a person who's blind who's trying to access, what they might like to eat on a menu, but there are just pictures and they can't access those. Or the obvious, a person in a wheelchair trying to access a higher floor and they're not able to because there is no elevator.
All right. So presumably most of you here today at Star Trek are responsible for computer software, whether websites or native applications with a user interface. So that's what we're going to focus on today. As part of their inclusive design initiative, Microsoft has produced this persona chart showing different ways that people might be disabled. And if you want to get a copy of this for yourself, it's easy. You can go out and Google it. Sorry, this is Microsoft. You can go out and Bing it. For example, someone might be permanently nonverbal. This person will always need a method of communication that doesn't rely on them speaking to you. On the other hand, you may have a person that has just come down with laryngitis. So next week, they may get over their laryngitis and they may be just fine to call your support line, But right now, they're really going to need to be able to type into a support chat instead. Just like a person in a wheelchair, many disabled users have assistive technology to help them navigate software. Some examples are screen reader software for users who are blind or have a cognitive impairment affecting reading, voice control or alternative input devices for users without the use of hands, the zoom-in feature on their web browser or in their operating system, or high contrast mode or dark mode or light mode. Now, it's a wonderful thing that all this assistive technology exists, that people are able to obtain it and use it. But it doesn't let us off the hook when we're designing and developing user interfaces. Our front ends still need to be designed to be compatible with assistive technology. Now, we're making all these claims, and you're sitting and wondering whether to believe us. Maybe you're already out there on your laptop fact-checking your data. I see you right there in the fourth row. Don't try to hide it. Well, as LeVar Burton used to say on Reading Rainbow, you don't have to take my word for it. Nothing about us without us is a phrase that originated with the disability rights movement, meaning that marginalized groups, including people with disabilities, should be included in the process of planning and implementing policies and programs that affect their lives. It emphasizes the importance of letting disabled individuals share their lived experiences. We want to give you the perspective of disabled users, users who may be your customers right now or may try to be in the future. And full disclosure, the way that we collected their perspectives, it was a little mean-spirited. We created a website and deliberately put in accessibility problems that we knew would prevent them from using it. So maybe an awkward silence as you decide whether to react to that or not. We weren't so cruel, though, as to surprise them with the problems. We were upfront and transparent, telling them that there would be problems ahead of time, and they were all willing to play along and happy to participate. So, without further ado, welcome to meetsnoot.com. Imagine you're a pet owner who's looking for a special companion for your furry friend. You hear about a new online dating website just for pets. You arrive at meetsnoot.com, and it's just what you're looking for. Features include a homepage with an adorable photo of 2 dogs, a link to sign up for the Meet Snoot newsletter, a PDF flyer for the first annual Meet Snoot meetup in Go Down Park here in Columbus, a handy list of dogs registered at Meet Snoot with a color indicator as to whether they're available, a profile of each registered dog, a form to fill out, the profile of yourself and your dog, and of course at the bottom is the terms and conditions that every website has to have. Now, the first customer you'll meet is named Nate Fernandez. A former coworker of mine, Nate is now on the IT staff at Quantum Health, headquartered here in Central Ohio. We asked Nate to do 3 tasks. First of all, read that flyer for the upcoming event, posted as a PDF on the main page. Second, imagine that he's looking for a small dog to meet up with his small dog. Browse the available dogs and choose one based on their descriptions. And finally, update his user profile on the website. Now, as he attempts these tasks, you'll hear an extra computerized voice talking. Nate is blind, and he uses screen reader software instead of looking at the screen to navigate websites and apps. So here we go.
Hi, my name's Nate, and I am a user of assistive technology, aka screen readers, aka stuff that makes the computer talk, that Dan and Lindsay will explain to you, I'm sure, in more detail. One fun thing about me, I am a huge sports nut, especially basketball and football are my 2 favorite sports. So looking at this website from my perspective, I have noticed quite a few things. Let's start with the flyer here. I'll try to have it show.
Ada project meeting, Ada project meeting, and Fernand's 3000.
That is NVDA
Welcome.
here.
Google Chrome column 4. Task list 1. Protected view. Meetsnoot.event.pdf. Meetsnoot.event.pdf.
All right, so this PDF.
Page 1. Visit meetsnoot.com for more. Visit meetsnoot.com for more details.
So all I get here is something that says visit meetsnoot.com for more details. I have no idea what's on this flyer at all. Now, I could use AI to find out, but the dangerous part about that is I don't know if there's any secure information that I don't want necessarily some AI tool having access to. So the other thing, too, is that it would take an additional probably 1 to 2 minutes for me to get a description of this using AI. So for everyone else, they're able to just read this and move on with their lives. I'm not able to do that. I'm going to exit out of here.
Meeting compact view Ada project meeting Microsoft meets Newt. Welcome. Google.
So on the website itself,
Visited link dogs.
I want to go find a dog for my dog friend, for my pet to have a doggy date with, I guess. Now, I noticed that there are lots of photos of dogs, but the problem is this is all I hear.
Main landmark list with 20 items. Picture of dog graphic link.
For that one,
Picture of dog graphic visited link. Picture of dog graphic link. Picture of dog graphic link. Picture of dog graphic link.
so,
Picture of dog graphic link.
and I'm going to use the tab key to move through this.
Picture of dog graphic link. Picture of dog graphic link.
All of these links are labeled the same, and they're all just apparently a picture of a dog. I have no idea unless I click on each one of these.
Picture of dog graphic visited link.
Now I'm going to use this cheat code and use the V key, which, fun fact, screen reader users are able to use keyboard shortcuts to get to things. So I'm going to go click on
Meets Newt.
this
Banner
one.
landmark visited link graphic meets Newt. Navigation landmark list with meets Newt. Memory usage.
Oh, other thing. When I go to a new page, the title is the same. So this dog here apparently
Main landmark Duke heading level 2.
is Duke. But I had no idea. So what should really be happening here is I should have a title that says something like Meet Duke - Snoot, or Snoot - Meet Duke, whatever, your marketing department wants you to do. But anyway, so that would be really helpful. So unless I literally take a long time to go through this website, I'm not going to know anything that sighted users would know by simply looking at the screen for probably about 2 seconds.
Unlabeled graphic.
Let's go
Meets
to
Newt.
the. I'm going to go to the form.
Meets Newt. Welcome. Navigation. Profile visited link. Content info landmark list with 3 items.
Profile. Sorry.
Navigation landmark list with 3 items. Profile visited link. Meets Newt. Profile view. Banner landmark visited link. Navigation landmark list with 3 items. Banner landmark meets Newt graphic visited link.
And I'm going to tab.
Dogs visited link. Profile visited. Main landmark edit button.
Tab. Oh, there's an edit button for this profile. Now, what I would usually do is hit the letter H here.
Profile heading level 1. First name. Barbara. Last name. Buckeye.
Oh, okay. So this is, but you can edit the
button.
information on this form.
Meets Newt.
Okay, cool.
Profile
Yes, that's
Banner
right. So I'm going to go here. And again, I'm going to tab.
Navigation landmark list. Dogs visited link. Profile. Main landmark. Edit selected Barbara.
So I'm guessing this is the first name, but all I hear is edit. Let's see what happens when I go through here.
Edit selected Buckeye. Edit selected Buckeye. Edit selected Columbus, Ohio.
So apparently I'm supposed to, from this information, know whether or not something's in a name, an address, a phone number. I don't know. Because if this form were not already filled in for me, which,
www.
oh dear, I ran out of time to fill out the form. I got no warning about that I was going to have X amount of time to complete this form, or maybe even have a chance to save my work. So anything I would have put on this form would have been lost. Anyway, back to this. Don't pre-fill information into these edit boxes, please. That's super annoying. I get the idea behind it, but please don't do that. Just give people examples, and there's different ways to do it that I'm sure Dan and Lindsay can go into if you all have questions. So basically, for those people using screen readers, this website is awful. I would not recommend using this service in its current form, but I'm sure with the proper remediation and the proper attention to accessibility for those with screen readers and for those who just use keyboards, which are a lot of people, by the way, I'm sure this could become a really cool resource for people to use. Oh, by the way, avoid PDFs at all costs. Mic drop.
All right. So, what did our developers do wrong to make Nate give up and go visit our competitors' websites instead? Later in the presentation, we'll go into more detail. But in summary, the PDF, images, and form were coded in such a way that the website looks fine to a sighted user, but is basically nonsense to a screen reader user.
All right. Our next customer is one of my dearest friends. He also happens to be on the autism spectrum. His name is Jacob. when we're hanging out together, we usually like to watch Mean Girls at his apartment. So that's something we like to do together. And we tasked Jacob with filling out the form that you saw Nate using at the end and completing a profile for his dog.
My name is Jacob. A fun fact about me is I have a very optimistic, diligent personality. Honestly and truthfully, I was frustrated when it timed me out because I needed more time to process. If this were a real website, I'd just make it a one and done, honestly and truthfully. Usually, I like a mentor to help me buy things online. Then they can step in if there's a timer.
Okay, so obviously the form didn't allow for processing time and also didn't allow Jacob to save any of his progress, which is not accessible and irritating. Our final customer is someone near and dear to my heart. Shout out to my mom. This is Amy McKevich. Before retirement, she worked in real estate, in the real estate capital office at KeyBank. She enjoys traveling. Her and my dad are traveling all the time. She's also a cancer survivor.
Hi, I'm Amy McKevich. A fun fact about me is I'm a snowbird in Florida during the winter months. I use my phone to access the terms and conditions, and I couldn't see them because I couldn't zoom in, so I basically couldn't read them. If this was another site where I couldn't read the terms and conditions, I would not access the site because if I can't read it, I'm not going to agree to something that I'm not able to read.
So this is something that I've seen my mom struggle with, and it's really affected her independence when navigating web content online. The website design was targeted, it only targeted one segment of users, and that was users with really good eyes. So she's not alone. 12% of the American population over the age of 40 has moderate to severe vision impairment, and that can affect their ability to read and access content online. So now that you've seen all of the reasons why our website Meet Snoot was not accessible, we are going to give you some actionable advice so that you don't make the same mistake. Time limits. So here are some helpful tips for designing with accessibility and time limits in mind. So allowing the user to disable time limits is a really nice accommodation. Eliminating time limits if that's appropriate and if something you can do. Alerting the user when time is running out. As you could hear, Nate was super frustrated when he was just timed out and he couldn't save his progress and there was no warning. And then allow the user to extend the session. So extended time is really helpful usually for folks who are dyslexic, have ADHD, have a cognitive disability, and users who are on the spectrum. And alt text. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of alt text. Oh, okay, I love that. So alternative text or alt text is a crucial tool that helps people with visual impairments understand the purpose of images in content. Screen reader software, like you heard in Nate's video, NVDA is a popular screen reading software that we use when we're testing products. It reads the alt text aloud and enables the user to have an experience and experience the web content in fullness. So in the spirit of the national championship win, we had to do that because we're from Ohio State. We have an example of a screen reader reading alt text here.
Graphic image of the mascot, Brutus Buckeye, pointing at the camera and smiling.
Okay, so when designing and developing, here are some tips to consider when adding alt text to images. And we see a lot of these mistakes with software that we test and evaluate for accessibility. So one thing to note are that image captions and alt text are very different. So image captions expand on the image and are part of storytelling. Alt text describes what exactly is going on in that photo, the photo's contents. Also, don't trust AI to understand your image. Not only will you maybe not like what it has to say, but I've experienced firsthand, like, it can be very stereotypical and can be insensitive through its descriptions. So if you must use AI-generated alt text, I highly recommend having a human reviewer, and yay, job security for us. So AI-generated alt text often lacks contextual understanding, and it's typically not as detailed as we went over. You never want to present the user with default or generic alt text like you saw when Nate was trying to look at the doggy dating profiles and NVDA kept saying graphic link picture of dog. You also want to remember to include important text that may be in the image. So if there's text within the image, you want to make sure that you include that because that's very important information. You also don't want to forget CSS images if they're non-decorative. So a non-decorative CSS image serves a functional or informational purpose rather than just purely aesthetic. These images contribute directly to the content or the meaning of the web page. Imagine a web page where there's a background image of a map and it provides, crucial geographical content to the user, such as like the location of a specific event. The map image in the background visually conveys the location of the event, like for example, Central Park, which adds meaning to the text. So it's not just a design element, it provides functional content-related info to users.
Okay, now we'll talk about zoom and text size. So first of all, please don't disable zoom on mobile. It seems like sometimes some designers will get, really enamored with their design and want to try to make sure the users can't do anything that would change how the design is presented to them. But the problem is that people are using different devices and different settings on different devices. Larger text, they may need to pinch to zoom to be able to see things. So, please don't disable the ability to do that. Ensure that enlarged text is not truncated. So besides pitching to zoom, it's also possible to increase the text size in your phone or your computer so that the text gets bigger while the graphics elements in general stay the same size. So we would like to ask you to test with that. Make sure that the text isn't running into other text. It isn't getting cut off, especially if you can't scroll over to see the cut off text, and that it's not, getting truncated by graphical elements. It is possible, and we'd rather you don't do this, to add CSS styling that prevents text from being resized. And if you do that to some text and others, you may get a user with a strange experience that they've increased their text size, but it's only affected some text. So here's some great big text on part of the page and small text on the other. So please make sure the text can all be resized the same way. And don't try to have your website simulate a printed document. The web has different capabilities. We all know about responsive design, where our websites can look good on both desktop and mobile. So if your websites, please take advantage of the fact that people may be using lots of different ways to view your content. And also, if you're working on mobile apps, try to account for that also. Now we'll talk about forms. One really nice thing to do is to associate the visible label with the form field. In HTML, that's done with the label tag and then the for attribute pointing to the field. That way, when someone's going through with a screen reader like Nate did, when they tab to each form field, instead of just saying input, it'll say the name of the field that the label is associated with. And as a bonus for everybody, it will allow you to click or tap on the label, and then the form field will get activated. And, again, good for everyone, but also especially good for people who may need a larger tap area due to a dexterity issue. When you post a form, first of all, you want to make sure that people are notified as to whether it succeeded or not. Visually, that is often apparent because an error appears or it just goes to something else. If someone's using a screen reader, it may or may not be apparent. If you're doing a full postback, meaning you're going to a whole new web page, it will announce that you've gone to a new web page. But if you're doing some Ajax-y stuff where you're like just replacing part of the web page, it may not say anything at all. So your user's sitting there saying, did anything happen when I just click submit? So please, we would ask you to look up how to use something called ARIA alerts to alert the user, yes, this posted, or no, it didn't. Please make sure to display all the errors and make it clear enough that people know what they did wrong and how to fix it. And if they do make an error or they have to go back a step, don't clear out the form. It's annoying for everyone if you suddenly have to retype something you just typed a second ago, but it can be especially difficult for someone who takes a long time to type, perhaps because they're using a non-keyboard device, and each keystroke they do may be a lot of effort. And for the love of all that's good and holy, please don't disable pasting in fields. We sometimes see in password fields, or when you are trying to log into something and it gives you a one-time code and you have to copy that code and then type it in. Sometimes people will disable copy and paste in those fields. I think it's some kind of misguided security concern, but again, for everyone, but especially for people who may have a memory issue or may have dexterity disability, just let us paste, please. Some miscellaneous advice for our coders. We would ask you not to use div and span elements when there's a more appropriate semantic HTML element to use. So divs and spans, they're not bad in and of themselves. Divs are great for doing layouts, and spans are great if you have like a section of a sentence that has to look different than the rest. That's great. But with some design systems, there seems to be a spate of things that aren't divs being coded as divs. So like a button is coded as a div, and since a div by itself isn't going to act like a button, we have to add JavaScript to react to clicks. We have to style it to look like a button, and we have to, if we're being accessible, we have to add what's called an ARIA label to tell, or a role, to tell users that, yes, this is a button. So that's a lot of work when you could just code it as an HTML button. I feel like coding a button as a div is like driving a nail into a board using a shovel. You could probably do it, but the process is going to be harder and the result's going to be worse. And the more code we add, the more chance for errors. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, okay, you're telling us all this stuff we got to do, but couldn't I just reply to this email I got last week where someone was selling me an overlay where I can just add this one thing to my website and it'll become accessible? Overlays, which are also called accessibility widgets, are JavaScript components that are tacked onto your existing website in an attempt to fix accessibility problems you have. And often you can tell if one is present if you land on a website and you see like a little floating round blue button with like a person, and then you click it and some options come up. That's a good sign that there's one there. This is a business decision you have to make. You may find that it's economical compared to redoing your code base, which of course is a lot of work and expense. But we do want to give you a few downsides of using these overlays. So first of all, it's an extra layer of JavaScript, so it's more code running on your site. It's definitely not going to speed things up, and it could slow things down. especially, for people that are still on older devices, like my brother-in-law who's still rocking a Pixel 3. You don't want to, drag things down for them. And of course, as developers, we're often developing on, nice systems, and sometimes we forget about the older devices. Users with disabilities, they already have solutions that they're used to. So you saw Nate using the screen reader earlier. He's been using it for years. He knows exactly how to do it, how to make it interpret websites in a way where he can quickly and efficiently do things as long as the websites are coded correctly. Now, if you buy an accessibility widget and stick it on there, you're suddenly making things available in ways that people aren't used to. So it's likely to slow them down because they have to learn this new method of doing things just for your website, as opposed to doing the standard thing that works for all websites. And overlays, they don't fix all problems, and they're not advertised to fix all problems. They only say that they fix some of them, and they may actually also introduce new problems, which is something we've seen as we've done testing. Suddenly a button becomes unavailable because these overlays, they're using JavaScript to try to guess what it is wrong on your website, and if it guesses wrong, it could see what it thinks is a problem and then fix it, and suddenly it's a problem. Really, the gold standard is to use semantic HTML and standard accessibility features. Now, PDFs is kind of a whole can of worms. We can't get into it too much in the time we have. But if you post a PDF to be able to make it accessible, so you saw the one that Nate looked at, all it said was, go visit our website. It wasn't tagged correctly. So, PDFs represent a visual document, but you can add something called tags to a PDF, which are invisible codes that tell people using assistive technology, such as a screen reader, this is text, this is what the text is supposed to say, this is the order that the text is supposed to be read in, this is a graphic, these are headers. A lot of things that you get for free with HTML. So you want to make sure that you try, if possible, to use software that exports accessible PDFs. Some good software that can do that, Microsoft Office does a great job. If you're on Linux, LibreOffice does a good job with that. Last time we checked, Google Docs doesn't do such a good job. After exporting a PDF, it often can be really good, but it's usually not all the way there because it may not completely know what your intention was. For example, what's the logical order to read the document? So what you can do is you can manually remediate with Adobe Acrobat. Adobe has provided in Acrobat Pro some really good tools to tag your PDF, fix the reading order, and make sure that someone using a screen reader is going to be able to access all the information. Now, the downside, of course, is that Acrobat Pro is kind of expensive, and it is a long process to do that manual remediation. So our recommendation is anytime you can help it, don't publish a PDF online. Sometimes you have to. Maybe it's a legal document. Maybe it's something someone's going to print, and you really need the format to be right. But if you just use HTML, accessibility is going to be a lot better by default.
Okay, now we're going to talk about keyboards, which are very, very important to a lot of people in the accessibility world who have disabilities. So a person may not have use of their hands, and they use an alternate input device, such as a switch or a sip and puff, and that's the picture that we have on the screen. It allows users to move through web pages or through their computer with their breath. It's a really cool tool. Keyboards also help individuals navigate mobile apps. So a lot of the times, people are like, why are you testing a mobile app with a keyboard? That's because a lot of users with disabilities who have limited functioning in their hands use keyboards to navigate the web. Okay, the easy peasy accessibility test. This is something that we use frequently at Ohio State. This will give you some sense of how accessible something is, and it's a great initial step. If you just started thinking about accessibility, it will give you a sense of how accessible a website is to a screen reader and to keyboard users. So it doesn't require any special knowledge or equipment, which is why we love it and love recommending it. So here are some steps. So first, hide your mouse and stay away from your touchpad. You want to use the tab, enter, space, and arrow keys to navigate the site or the software. And then while you're doing that, you want to ask yourself, are all of the interactive elements reachable? Is keyboard focus visible? Are all interactive elements operable? And is all of the content viewable? And can you scroll? Okay, here are our final thoughts that we hope will be impactful for those who still might be thinking, I don't have disabled people trying to access my site. That same argument was heard when ADA became law in 1990. So, for example, bus operators complained that they shouldn't have to make their buses accessible because people in wheelchairs didn't ride them. Well, of course they didn't, because they couldn't access them. So here are the facts. 70% of disabled online shoppers are forced to leave websites that they find difficult to navigate. That number was shocking to me. 61% of disabled users are unlikely to return to a website on mobile if they have trouble browsing it, and 79% visit a competitor's site instead. So the estimated cost of fixing an accessibility bug in software after it's in production is 30 times the cost of fixing it during the design phase. That's why we always recommend incorporating accessibility at the beginning of your design phase. Studies indicate that businesses lose over $6.9 billion annually because their websites are not compliant with accessibility standards. So there's no shame from us if you haven't really been thinking about accessibility, but the really cool thing is we hope that now we've equipped you with some tools and you can play a huge part in making our world more accessible for people with disabilities, which is something really important and really special.
All right, so now Lindsay and Dan at Star Trek have convinced you all that you need to make your software accessible to people with disabilities. And you're wondering, what can I do now? How can I learn more? How can I get more information and complete what I want to complete? Our first and highest recommendation, if you can do this, is to try to find disabled people, whether in person or on social media, and just follow them or talk to them, learn about the barriers that they're running into, their frustrations, and see how they're using assistive technology and think about how that assistive technology is going to work with your product or service. You can meet or follow accessibility professionals. There's a lot of people out there on social media posting stuff. You can search for hashtag A11Y, which is kind of a funny abbreviation for accessibility, or hashtag accessibility. And you can find a nice list at a11y-webring.club. You can sign up for accessibility newsletters. One that we like is a11yweekly.com. It'll give you a nice digest of what's new in the world of accessibility and some tips and news items. There's actually a lot of good free content out there that you can watch and learn how to make things accessible. Some ones that we would recommend are A11Y Talks. There's one of those every month. DQ-AXCon is an annual event where they have lots of different sessions. Microsoft Ability Summit is once a year. WordPress Accessibility Meetup is really good. Even if you don't use WordPress, they have a lot of general purpose accessibility content. And there's a lot of webinars at a place called the Great Lakes ADA Center webinar archive. And if you want to get some paid training, if you want something, really regimented with some, assignments and evaluations, you can get them from organizations. And 2, you can do our DQ and Funka. And actually, Ohio State uses DQ, and it worked really well as we were getting started out with this stuff. And then finally, you can dig into the standards. There's international standards called WCAG, which stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. These are the ones that most people try to follow and that you may have heard of. And there's other great accessibility documentation from the W3C, the people who make web standards, and the MDN, the Mozilla Developer Network, that you're probably familiar with if you do HTML. They tie in accessibility information to their HTML documentation. Okay, and that's the end of our presentation. So we're ready for any questions, either here or in the Discord.
So let's say we can't find number 1 from your list. Do you have any recommended developer tools or plugins for the IDE to test including our WCAG compliance?
Okay, right, yeah. The question was any recommended developer tools. Yeah, there's quite a few good ones out there. There's one called Wave, which is has been a standard for a long time. That's an add-in you can put in your browser, and it'll do an automated scan of the current web page you're on. And automated scans, they can find some problems. That's a stat you often hear in these kind of talks. What do they say? A third, I think, usually. A third of problems you can find through an automated scan. Other ones they're too dependent on the context, and they really need a human to find them. But the Wave tool is nice. IBM has an accessibility toolkit. Microsoft has one. And there are, for your CI/CD, your code push-out processes, there's, lots of systems have tools that allow you to include accessibility checks as part of the checks before something is checked in or pushed out. So yeah, I don't have the names of them off the top of my head, but just look those stuff up and they're out there. Did you have anything to add?
No, that was great.
Okay. Okay.
You mentioned alerts earlier, but then you also talked about ARIA alerts. Do you find that actual true browser alerts, which I think have fallen out of favor for their display and design purposes, are those actually more effective for accessibility, because of how they're integrated with the browsers?
That's a good question. Yeah, so the question was about the difference between the built-in browser alert, where you're using the alert statement in JavaScript, versus an ARIA alert. So yeah, the ARIA alert, it only reads out to assistive text, so it's specifically for them, whereas the browser alert, it will display for everyone and also be read by assistive text. So you may think, that maybe that's better because it works for everyone. And, I don't know, I use it sometimes. I guess the ARIA alert, maybe it's best if you're designing your own alerts, if you want your alerts to look on brand and you don't want to use the browser one. So, I have, let's say I post a form and a red box appears that says, oh, you had these errors, blah, 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 blah. A visual user will see that. Maybe it's styled the way you want in a way that you think will draw attention to it. But by default, it won't be read by the screen reader, so that's when the ARIA alert steps in to make sure that that's covered. Does that make sense? Okay. Oh, gosh.
I would add to that conversation that the ARIA alert is less disruptive than a JavaScript alert, because if you pop up a JavaScript alert, I think by sort of accessibility standards, you have to put the focus back to where it last came from. So with that ARIA alert, you can alert your assistive users to something without you having to bring the focus back to a specific object on the page.
That's an awesome point. I'll repeat it for everybody. A nice thing about the ARIA alert is you can manage the focus yourself. You can make sure that focus stays on what you want it to stay on, whereas with a browser browser built-in alert, it's more disruptive. It's going to send focus to that alert, and that may not be the user flow that you want. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.